All right, continuing on with these graphs we assigned the other day. Number 7 is 3 sine of 4/3 x. Amplitude is absolute 3, which is 3. The shape is a positive sine curve. The interval, place 4/3 x between 0 and 2 pi. We need to multiply everything by 3/4 to clear this out. Well, 3/4 times 0 is 0. 3/4 times 4/3 cancels. This might take a little bit of working. I need 3/4 times 2 pi. Remember, this is 2 pi over 1. Top times top, bottom times bottom. Or we may simply cancel. So by whatever means, we end up with 3 halves pi. 0 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 3 halves pi. And so that should be, here we go. So here's 0, 1, 2, 3, and -3. Well, if that's 3, then that a little bit more than that. That's approximately pi. All right, so this is 3 halves. 3 halves. Well, we know this is 1 half. This is 3 halves pi. And so 1 period of this function needs to get graphed between 0 and 3 halves pi. The question now is, what are these midpoints? See, these are thirds. These don't have anything to do with these fourths. So we don't really even need these values in here. This was just to find the approximate distance of how that, where this value is located. Remember, this is 3 pi over 2. I need half of that. Well, half is top times top, bottom times bottom. Top times top, bottom times bottom. So that becomes 3/4 pi. So this bit is 3 pi over 4, 3/4 pi. What's half of that? Half of that is half of 3/4 pi. 3 times top times top, bottom times bottom. This becomes 3/8 pi. All right. 3/8. So this is, now we're counting by 3/8. 3/8. Twice that is 6/8. And 3 more. 3/8, 6/8. This is 9/8. All right. Now, I'm not going to make you work through this detail on exam day, but for the record, you take this, cut it in half, 3 pi over 4, cut that in half, 3 pi over 8, and now count by 3/8. 3/8, 6/8, 9/8. So this is I've kind of botched that up. This is 9 pi over 8. I've made a mess of this. 9 pi over 8. And then this sketch needs to fit in that graph. Node, peak, node, trough. No, it's not that pictures. Make a big dot there. All right. Don't concern yourself too much about that. I just must have gotten a little frisky putting 4/3 x in there. So, all right, number 8. And what do we have here? Oh, I gotta get my computer back functioning here. There we go. It's negative cosine 5x. All right. Amplitude, this is all, should be getting in your comfort zone now. Absolute value of the coefficient. Remember, always absolute value. The amplitude is 1. Amplitude can never, ever be negative. It's the absolute value of the coefficient. And if you always use the absolute value, even if you don't need it, then you will be much more likely to remember it when you do need it. So amplitude is absolute value, which in this case is 1. Shape. This is the negative cosine graph, so we know the negative cosine shape. And then the interval. The interval is, what would that be? So the interval is 0, less than or equal to this argument, 5x less than or equal to 2 pi. All right? Solve for x in the middle. Multiply everything by 1/5. 1/5. And by now, we should be relatively comfortable with this. This is 2/5 pi. So, if this is 1, negative 1, 1, 2, 3. So there's pi. I'm making this a little bit larger here because it's going to be a very small graph if I'm not too careful. I need 2/5 of that. Oh, 2/5. 2/5 is, I'd say right about here. That's about 40%. So 2/5 is here. This is 2/5 pi. So this entire graph needs to fit in that little box. What's the halfway point? What is half of, what if half of 2/5? Well, that's 1/5. What's half of 1/5? What's half of 1/5? 1/10. And now once we have this, we're counting just like before. This is much easier compared to this mess up here. 1/10, 2/10, 3/10. And then this picture needs to go through that and fit in this box with these quarter poles. So this is the first is trough. The first quarter pole is the node. The halfway point is the peak. Third quarter pole is the node, and then the last is the trough. And so this graph, roughly speaking, looks like that. And the last we had here in our examples were, what do we have? The last one is -4 sine of x, and I should think this would be pretty straightforward by now. And I'll just rummage through this without too much to do. Since the argument is x, there's no changing, so the standard interval hasn't changed. 4. So that's 3. A little bit more than that is pi. We need to go to 2 pi. All right. And node, we have to make our quarter points. Pi over 2, 1/2, 2/2, 3/2. Trough, node, peak, node. So those are the 9 graphs to graph we had for the homework.